From the first whispered story passed from one generation to the next, to the vast digital libraries accessible in the palm of our hand, the quest for knowledge has been the driving force of human progress. It is a journey that began not in a classroom, but in the crucible of survival, where the first lessons were taught through imitation and experience. This is the complete history of education, an epic story of how we learned to learn, how we built civilizations on foundations of shared understanding, and how we continue to redefine what it means to be educated in an ever-changing world. Our story of formal education begins in the Fertile Crescent in ancient Mesopotamia, over 5,000 years ago. With the invention of writing, the wedge-shaped script known as cuneiform, came the need for a new kind of specialist, the scribe. To train them, the Sumerians established the first known schools called idabas, or tablet houses. Here, under the strict tutelage of a master scribe, young boys, primarily from elite families, spent years learning the complex system of hundreds of characters. Their curriculum was demanding, focusing on literacy, mathematics for accounting and land measurement, and the memorization of literature and legal codes. These early schools were not about critical thinking, but about preservation and administration, creating a class of bureaucrats who could manage the intricate workings of the world's first cities and empires. Simultaneously, along the banks of the Nile, ancient Egypt was developing its own sophisticated system. Egyptian education was deeply intertwined with religion and the state. Schools attached to temples and government offices trained scribes, priests, and architects. Their curriculum was immensely practical, encompassing not just the beautiful and complex hieroglyphic and hieratic scripts, but also advanced mathematics for engineering the pyramids, astronomy for creating their calendar, and medicine, as evidenced by texts like the Edwin Smith Papyrus, which shows a remarkable understanding of anatomy and surgical procedures. For the Egyptians, education was the key to maintaining cosmic order, or ma'at, and ensuring the smooth functioning of their enduring civilization. But it was in ancient Greece that the very purpose of education was transformed. The Greeks were the first to ask not just what to learn, but why. In the city-state of Athens, the goal became the cultivation of the well-rounded citizen, a person developed in mind, body, and spirit. Thinkers like Socrates championed a new method of inquiry, the Socratic method, using probing questions to stimulate critical thinking and expose underlying assumptions. His student Plato founded the Academy, often cited as the first institution of higher learning in the Western world, where philosophy, mathematics, and gymnastics were taught. Plato's own student Aristotle established the Lyceum, a school that emphasized empirical observation and logic, laying the groundwork for the scientific method. This Greek ideal of a liberal education, one that liberates the mind, would echo through the millennia, shaping the very foundation of Western thought. The pragmatic Romans adopted and adapted the Greek model to suit the needs of their sprawling empire. While they respected Greek philosophy and literature, Roman education was intensely practical, focused on producing effective orators, lawyers, engineers, and administrators. The rhetorician Quintilian was a key figure, arguing for public education over private tutoring and emphasizing the importance of a child's early years and the need for education to be an enjoyable process. The Roman system was designed to create the ruling class of a global superpower, instilling the skills of rhetoric and law necessary to govern diverse peoples and manage a complex state. Far to the east, ancient China developed a unique and remarkably enduring educational system centered on the philosophy of Confucius. Confucianism stressed ethics, social harmony, and respect for authority. The ultimate goal of education was to cultivate the junzi, or gentleman, a morally upright and wise individual. The cornerstone of this system was the imperial examination, a grueling series of tests based on the Confucian classics. For over 1,300 years, this system was the primary path to social mobility and a position in the state bureaucracy. It created a highly literate and culturally unified ruling class, but also fostered a culture of rote memorization and conformity that would be challenged only in the modern era. With the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe entered the Middle Ages. Much of the classical knowledge of Greece and Rome was lost or forgotten. During this period, the flame of learning was kept alive in isolated monasteries. Monks painstakingly copied and preserved religious texts and the few classical works that remained. These monastic schools and later cathedral schools were the primary centers of education, focused almost exclusively on training clergy. The curriculum was formalized into the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy. Then, beginning in the 11th and 12th centuries, a new institution emerged, the university. Guilds of students and masters in cities like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford created centers for higher learning, rediscovering classical texts and fostering a new spirit of intellectual inquiry. While Europe was in its dark ages, the Islamic world was experiencing a golden age of science and culture. Cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba became vibrant intellectual hubs. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad was a legendary library and translation institute, where scholars from different faiths worked to translate the great works of Greece, India, and Persia into Arabic. Islamic scholars made monumental contributions. They preserved and built upon classical knowledge, inventing algebra, advancing medicine and optics, and developing sophisticated astronomical models. Figures like Ibn Sina, whose Canon of Medicine was a standard medical text in Europe for centuries, and Al-Khwarizmi, whose name gave us the term algorithm, were giants whose work would later fuel the European Renaissance. The turning point that propelled Europe out of the Middle Ages and into the modern era was a technological one: Johannes Gutenberg's invention of the printing press around 1440. This was a revolution on an unprecedented scale. Suddenly, books were no longer rare, hand-copied treasures available only to the wealthy elite and the clergy. They could be mass-produced, making knowledge accessible to a rapidly growing audience. The printing press fueled the Protestant Reformation by allowing reformers like Martin Luther to spread their ideas directly to the people, who were encouraged to read the Bible for themselves. It accelerated the scientific revolution, enabling scientists to share their discoveries quickly and widely. Literacy rates soared and the demand for education exploded. This new intellectual climate gave rise to the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. Philosophers began to fundamentally rethink the nature of education. The English philosopher John Locke proposed that the mind is a tabula rasa, or blank slate, at birth, and that knowledge is derived from experience. This idea implied that education and environment, not just birthright, shape the individual. In France, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, in his seminal work Émile, argued for a child-centered education, believing that children should learn naturally through their own curiosity and interaction with the world, rather than through rote instruction and harsh discipline. These radical ideas laid the philosophical groundwork for the modern democratic vision of education. The 19th century, shaped by the Industrial Revolution, saw the birth of mass public education. The new factory-based economy required a workforce with basic literacy and numeracy. At the same time, reformers saw education as a solution to the social ills of poverty, crime, and social unrest in the rapidly growing cities. In the United States, Horace Mann championed the Common School, a free, universal, non-sectarian institution that would bring children from all social classes together and create a shared civic identity. This model, often called the factory model of education, emphasized standardization, punctuality, and obedience, qualities desired in a factory worker. For the first time in history, education for all was not just an ideal but a state-sponsored project. As the 20th century dawned, a backlash against the rigidity of the factory model emerged. The progressive education movement, led by the American philosopher John Dewey, argued that education should be about learning by doing. Dewey advocated for a curriculum that was relevant to students' lives, emphasizing problem-solving, critical thinking, and collaboration. He saw schools as miniature democratic societies where students could practice the skills of citizenship. The 20th century also became a battleground for equality in education. The civil rights movement in the United States fought and won landmark legal battles like Brown v. Board of Education to dismantle racial segregation in schools. Around the world, post-colonial nations established their own education systems, and access to schooling for both boys and girls expanded dramatically. Today we are in the midst of another educational revolution, one as profound as the invention of the printing press, the digital revolution. The internet has democratized access to information on a global scale. Anyone with a connection can access lectures from the world's top universities through massive open online courses, or MEOCs. Classrooms are being transformed by technology, with interactive whiteboards, tablets, and educational software creating more personalized and engaging learning experiences. The concept of blended learning, which combines traditional face-to-face instruction with online media, is becoming the new norm. This technological shift is forcing us to rethink everything, from the role of the teacher to the physical space of the classroom. Looking to the future, artificial intelligence promises to push the boundaries even further. AI-powered tutors can provide students with immediate, personalized feedback, adapting to their individual learning pace and style in a way a single teacher in a crowded classroom never could. AI can automate administrative tasks, freeing up teachers to focus on what they do best: mentoring, inspiring, and guiding their students. However, this future also presents challenges. We must address the digital divide, ensuring equitable access to these new tools. And we must redefine the curriculum to focus less on memorizing facts, a task computers do perfectly, and more on cultivating uniquely human skills: creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and collaboration. The history of education is a mirror reflecting our own evolution. From clay tablets to AI tutors, our methods have changed, but the fundamental human impulse to understand, to share, and to build a better future for the next generation remains constant. The journey is far from over. As we stand on the cusp of a new era, the story of education continues to be written, one learner at a time.